I love St. John of the Cross. He is the Prince of Mystics. Now, a lot of people, when they think of St. John of the Cross, they think, oh, he was a stern, serious, grave man. You know, his theology, his spirituality of nada, nada, nada. But you study the life of St. John of the Cross, he was a very tender-hearted man. For example, before joining the Carmelites, which he reformed with St. Teresa of Avila, he worked as we would call it a nurse today. You know, he cared for the sick. And so his whole life in his community, when someone would get sick, he would care for the brother. And they say he would care for the brother like a mother with great tenderness. He'd spoon feed them if they were really sick. And they said it was beautiful how tender and loving St. John of the Cross was. Another thing is they say that St. John of the Cross had a tremendous love for God's creation. When he would see God's creation, he would see the Creator. And he'd be enraptured. And they say he would spend sometimes long hours just looking out enraptured at the birds and the beauty of creation. And he would take sometimes his prayer times out in the garden. And also, and people might not know this about St. John of the Cross either, is he had a tremendous devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. As a matter of fact, as a child, I think he might have been 5 years old or something, he was playing and I think there was a stick or something that fell into a muddy pool of water. And he went to reach for it and he fell in and he was starting to drown. And he said a beautiful woman came, grabbed him, pulled him out. And he told that story over and over again his whole life. And when he told the story, for some reason he found it funny. I think it's because somehow he was still clinging to the stick he was trying to get, as if that was so important or something. And also his community, the Carmelites, when he joined the Carmelites, back then, when there weren't as many, you know, now we have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of religious communities, but back then when there weren't as many communities, the Carmelites, you know what they were known as? Our Lady's community. Because, you know, the Carmelite community came under the inspiration of Mount Carmel and all of that, following the way of Elijah and so on. And the habit of the Carmelites was simply referred to as Our Lady's habit. And so St. John of the Cross, he joined our Blessed Mother's community, Our Lady's community, and he had a tremendous devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And as a matter of fact, the call he felt to reform the Carmelites, that back then he thought they were lax, but you know, compared to today's standards, they were not lax. And anyways, I won't get into that. But the point is he felt it was very much the Blessed Mother who was calling him to reform the Carmelites, you know, for her honor. And so, beautiful story. Now, it is true that St. John of the Cross, his spirituality was very much nada, 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 which means, does anyone know what nada means? Nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And his charism was spiritual direction. It wasn't preaching. St. Teresa of Avila said when he preached, it was, you know, kind of plain, wasn't too remarkable. But they said anyone who would meet with him one-on-one would just be so deeply touched and also kind of receive grace to grow spiritually. That was his charism. He spiritual directed St. Teresa of Avila's sisters and had a profound effect. It was able to help them to grow in holiness. But he would draw these little graphs. For him, the key image of spiritual growth in the spiritual life was climbing a mountain. And he would show the way up the mountain, all these different ways. But he says the best way to get up the mountain is just to go straight up. And if you want to go straight up, you gotta let go, let go, let go. Nada, nada. Don't be attached to anything. Nothing. And this is the man who, which, by the way, it's kind of common sense for mountain climbing. If you want to climb a mountain quickly, don't bring the kitchen sink. Don't bring 5 changes of clothes. You know, you want to travel as light as possible. But St. John of the Cross, you know, when he was working on his reform, they say, was authorized by the Vatican's representative. But the leaders of the Carmelites, they didn't really acknowledge that, so they threw him in a dungeon. Back then, monasteries had dungeons. I don't know if there's a dungeon up in Cumbermere for the guys there, but anyways, they threw him in a dungeon for 9 months, barely fed him. They would take him out and beat him the odd time in front of the whole community. And then finally he escaped miraculously, with the help of the Blessed Mother. But they say those 9 months, what's 9 months? It's the time it takes for a child to develop and eventually be born. When he came out of the dungeon after those 9 months, he escaped at night and went to the sisters who were cloistered, so they let him in. He hid there. They say when he came, the sisters couldn't recognize him. He was so emancipated and so beaten up. And they spent the night listening to him talking. Guess what he talked about the whole night? How wonderful God is. He had such a powerful experience of the reality and love and presence of God during those 9 months. It transformed him, and from there came his great writings, which are now classics. And he's a doctor of the church. And so in that time in the dungeon, he didn't cling even to his own comfort or his reputation or anything. You know, he solely sought God, and he found God. And so there's a beautiful quote in the Missalette today from St. John of the Cross. He says, "The endurance of darkness is the preparation for great light."